Mr. Pond Boss, tell me
Nice
what
little digger there.
to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Woo, got my own little bumper music there. Hello everybody, Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss, hanging out with my longtime good friend David Kimbell and his brother Stan, who is off camera. And we're at the Kimbell Ranch north of Lawton, Oklahoma, and got to take a look at their lake today. So welcome. Hey, you guys know the drill. Since we have no viewers yet, I'm going to say it to nobody. Click like, share this video to your timeline, and put hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Bill Shrum showed up from north of Oklahoma, or kind of northwest Oklahoma. So we have one viewer so far.
There you go.
So we're gonna hold our conversations till we get 2 or 3 more folks on here. This is a new time, starting at 7:30. Up until this time, I've done it from 6:30 to 7:30. And last week I posed the question, "Hey guys, would you guys like to switch to 7:30?" Every one of them, except the one, said yes, because they'd like to fish or do their chores, whatever they want to do.
You bet.
So I'm hanging out with David Kimbell and Stan, his brother. They live in Wichita Falls. They have a ranch here north of Lawton, Oklahoma, near Lake Latonka. Beautiful country up here. This is in the Wichita Mountains region of western central Oklahoma. And one of the fascinating things to me is you guys have this area has a herd of wild elk. There's no high fence, all low fence, and it's a huntable herd. So they get X number of permits, the community does in the area, to be able to hunt elk. And now this is probably the only herd east of the Rocky Mountains. Is that a fair statement, Dave?
Well, no, they've been making progress. Texas has got a couple of herds going.
Okay.
And
Oklahoma's got like 20-something counties.
yeah,
So there's elk herds living in 20-something counties in Oklahoma.
there's an open hunting season in 20 counties. And,
That's cool.
In Texas, the Marfa area out in
West
Trans-Pecos is full of elk now.
Excellent.
And they'll start to see elk all over West Texas.
Yeah.
So,
Very cool.
so people are speculating that they're going to
Repopulate.
restore it to most of their native habitat.
Oh man, that's cool. Well, to give our viewers a little bit of an idea, I met the Kimbell family, a long, long time ago, probably in the late 80s. And I remember bringing, I didn't put that on the Pond Boss page, I put that on mine. Oh no, I messed up, didn't I? Oops, sorry. Thought I put that on the Pond Boss page today. No wonder we've only got 10 people, but that's good. That's good. That's okay. We're going to work our way through it. I see Scott and Leah checking in from around Beggs, Oklahoma. John Dyer from the Carolinas. Well, Bill, I'm glad to know that now. Anyway, so met the Kimbells back in the late 80s. And the way we met was we delivered some trout. And if I remember, it was for your dad to be able to catch some trout in a small pond in the middle of the ranch. So I remember going to Ava, Missouri, picking up rainbow trout. And one trip in particular I remember, it was 12 degrees in Ava, and the lids to my tank were frozen shut. And they didn't want to load any trout until the temperature went up a little bit. So when it came time, they squirted some well water onto the lids on my hauling tank on a trailer, and we got them open. Then they filled me up with water and loaded the trout, and I didn't get out of there till like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I drove all night down Interstate 44, and I think I showed up at the ranch like at 2 in the morning or something ridiculous. Hey, there's Dustin Pratt checking in, family physician, family practitioner from Childress, Texas. So anyway, our relationship goes back a long way, and then you guys have got ponds there in Wichita County and some other areas, and we've worked on those. Let's talk in. There goes girlfriend. There's girlfriend barking. So you guys on the ranch, they would just kind of tell us about your lake, and this lake's been here a long time. The dam used to leak. So a few years ago, kind of tell everybody what happened, because this is a really interesting project.
So I never had really been involved fishing very much, or certainly not pond management. And we've owned the ranch for a long time and always hunted a lot. I figured I was supposed to work some of the time, and I've disproven that theory.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we bought the ranch next to us and had a beautiful 5-acre spring-fed lake. but it was a 50-year-old lake, and it was pretty silted up. It might have been 8 to 10 feet deep, right up next to the dam at the most. But half the lake was so shallow that it got grown up in aquatic vegetation every year, and so we wanted to do something, but we were scared to dig down because this country's got a lot of springs and
Rocky, really
gravel
rocky.
seams,
Yes.
and if we ever, and we've done this several times, taken a good lake and tried to scoop it out, and got into a gravel seam, and the lake never held water again. So I went to the Institute of Higher Pondology and saw Bob. I already knew him, and really enjoyed it. And Bob said, "Well, if you can't go down, go up."
And y'all hadn't thought of that yet, had you, or had you?
No, we hadn't.
Okay. There's Lewis Wellen checking in from Alexandria, Louisiana. We got to hang out a couple of weeks ago. Chris Chavetta, architect from St. Louis, Missouri. Jim Nordquist, reigning in Illinois. Good to see you. Ryan Clark, hello there. Ron Krisman, the smallmouth king from the northern part of the country, checking in. There's Fred Bingaman. He knows the drill. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Click like, share to your timeline. You're eligible for a drawing for a hat. We have some pretty cool hats. Brought a couple with me. And Fred knows the deal. So we're talking with a longtime friend and tonight's guest, David Kimbell, and we're talking about their lake and what they did. So they had this 5-acre spring-fed, silted-in lake that vegetated, and then you really weren't into fishing or wanting to learn about ponds, and all of a sudden, what happened? You'd been working forever, and then all of a sudden, like I said, it was like a switch flipped.
Yes.
So tell me about that.
But it was just so fun to have the lake on the ranch, and we live only about an hour and a half away, and so always came up here to hunt and swim in the summer, but never had any place to fish, and so it was so cool to have a great fishing lake, and it was pretty good, even being pretty silted up. There were a lot of bass in there. Somebody had done a good job of stocking bluegill and bass before we owned it, and it was probably pretty bass crowded when we got a hold of it. We started harvesting quite a few bass. Again, I picked that up at the school that Bob does, the Institute of Higher Pondology.
And you've been to 2 of those.
I've been to 2 of them, and what's worked well for me is you get a lot of ideas, hear a lot of things that would have taken you a long time to think of, if you're like me. And you get some of that done, and then it was real helpful to go back a second time and get some new projects, and you get some of that done, and I'll come back.
All right. Well, we got room for 3 more in the May session. Nobody signed up yet for October, so we're going to do the Institute of Higher Pondology twice this year and see if we can make that thing grow. There's Bay Miltonberger. I was at Bays Lake yesterday near Hyco. Deborah Corlew's checking in. Jeremy Day. Jeremy's down around Montgomery County, Texas, kind of southeast of Navasota over there. So the lake was silted in, and the risks associated with removing the silt weren't worth the squeeze because of how much it would cost just to remove the silt and the risk of causing another leak. And I remember coming down here, and the lake was dropping fairly rapidly. And I remember looking on the back side of the dam and saw the biggest stand of willow trees in the semi-arid part of the country that you'll ever see. So that was a pretty good clue that the dam was seeping. So we had that conversation about the dam seeping, and one of your local contractors that you've known for a long, long time that you trust came out here and started digging some test holes and trying to see what was going on. So you guys decided to raise the dam. How far up did you go with the dam?
We went 4 feet, and so that made it close to 10 acres, and so that means we're impounding about 50 acre feet, and you go much more than that, and you got to start getting permits.
Okay.
And so that was kind of our wall that kept us from raising it any more, as we didn't want to spend a year or 2 getting permits.
So okay, so you and the watershed suits it. it's been full several times, and then of course it evaporates, and maximum evaporation in the summertime in this arid part of the country is probably going to be half an inch, maybe a little bit more per day in the hot summer months. So this lake's it can drop a foot, in a month and a half. So that's part of the deal. So you guys decided did you knock any of the dam down to get ready to build it back up, or did you just core trench through it? How'd you do that?
We did that. So we siphoned a lot of water out of it, lowered the lake level so we could get in there and work, and then started core trenching. And the local contractor had worked on this lake before, and he knew.
I forgot about that.
It was before his time when it was built, but he had a real good idea of what the problem was and where it was. So he started on the west side where he envisioned Old Creek would have run, and he didn't make 20 or 30 feet before he got into the Old Creek, and the water was moving through the dam so fast it was caving in the
core trench.
The core trench faster than he could dig it out.
That was a mess. So now another issue you guys had, I remember talking about, was you got to get some clay. Yeah. So you guys dug around literally and found some veins of clay here on the ranch, right? And how far did you have to haul that clay?
Maybe a couple of miles.
I'd say 2 miles.
So they hauled clay in dump trucks 2 miles to refill the core trench, which was the core trench. How big was it? Was it 1 bucket wide on a track hoe, or was it bigger than that?
Well, that was the plan. It was going to be 4 feet wide, which is the bucket width. But like I say, he only made 20 or 30 feet of core trench when he got into where he suspected the leak would be. And it was just a massive leak.
Yes.
And he put 100% of the clay we had hauled up here into, I don't know, Stan, what was it? Maybe as big as 30 yards around by the time.
So the trench kept collapsing, so he kept digging it wider and bigger, really.
Yeah.
And so a whole lot of clay went in to fill that hole. But looking at it today, it looks like it's done a pretty good job. Here's a rule of thumb from the book of Maikato. All dams leak. They all leak. This one's leaking, but we estimate it to be maybe 10 gallons per minute. I'm not even sure it's that much. That's irrelevant for a 10-acre lake. That's actually not bad at all. If you can get that, you're winning the game. And as big as the watershed is, even for the evaporation, you guys don't need but a 3-inch rain or so, and that's going to add water to the lake. Okay, so the lake's down. Well, they're working on the dam, digging and creating a core trench to block the flow of water through the dam, and then you guys raise the dam 4 feet.
And the spillway.
And you raise the spillway 4 feet as well. Okay.
Yes.
And so now there's about 3 feet of freeboard, it looks like,
Right.
from the dam down to the spillway, and it went from 5 acres of a silted-in mud hole of a pond to a nice 10-acre lake. And what's really cool is I think it's the east side, it's kind of a rock bluff that drops almost straight off, and there's all kinds of trees and button bush and stuff that were growing above the water line about 2 or 3 feet, which are now submerged and have been turned into fish structure. But one of the cool things that you guys did was you created a habitat plan after you went to the Institute of Higher Pondology. So you created shameless plug. Hey, Dave Weber checking in from northwest Missouri, and Justin Ludwig, easy to drop a foot per month. Oh, really? Okay, yep, I got you. Virgil Meyer, Virgil built a lake about the same size as y'all's in Iowa, up in south central Iowa. And he's checking in tonight, and he is just as passionate about this stuff as you guys are, and that's pretty cool stuff. So now you created a habitat plan, and part of that plan was to use things that you had on the ranch. So
Right.
take us through that.
Okay, so the main thing that we had was a lot of old telephone poles. And these telephone poles were at least 50 years old.
So the creosote was pretty much gone.
We feel like it was
They were dry.
completely gone, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And so we built tic-tac-toe houses out of the telephone poles. I think we've got 12 of them in the lake. But let me start from the shore. So we came down on a 3-to-1 plane and got 4 feet deep, and then built a ledge along as far as we had the soil to do it, and then put pig gravel on that. So our spawning beds were about 4 feet deep, but the lake's not always full, so.
So spawning beds maybe 18 inches, maybe 3 feet, might be 4 feet.
It's moving around.
And there's a bunch of storms lining up, getting ready to blow this way. So today they're 3 feet deep. Tomorrow they may be 4 feet.
Yeah. But I really think next time I do that, I'm going to do them 5 feet deep.
Okay.
Because we have such a fluctuation on the water level. Yeah.
Yep.
I
And
think
so then, what kind of effort did it take, and how important is it to anchor your tic-tac-toe boards and your brush piles? You got brush piles too.
Yes.
So some of them you anchored.
Right, and some of them we didn't anchor enough.
So let's talk about that. So you anchored all of them,
Right, we did.
but you still had a couple of them float.
Yeah, out of 12, we have 3 that are
Not where you
floated
put them.
away from where we put them. But I think they'll still be good cover.
Yep.
And I think I can still move them. They hadn't waterlogged enough yet. We only did that early last summer to where they're waterlogged. They'll be permanently on the lake bottom, but they're not quite to that stage yet. So I think I can move them around some before they do that.
I bet you can. Let's see. Jeremy Day saying, what about railroad ties? Can you use them for structure? Sure. The thing you got to be careful about is be sure there is no creosote that can leach into the water. You want to avoid that. How long before they would dry out? Well, these telephone poles, it took them 50 years, but they got there. You know, and if you guys want to see an example of some of the structural type stuff we recommend, there's a video further down the timeline. After the show, check that out. That I don't know how this happened, because my typical views on our videos are 2,500 to 5,000 views. That one, 19 people shared, and I don't know who shared it. It's got a big audience, but there's 53,000 views on that video. It's a habitat video on the Pond Boss Facebook page. When you get ready after the show, scroll down and take a look at that one, and you can see some living examples of the kind of stuff that the Kimbells did here at Kimbell Ranch with this 10-acre lake. So you got the habitat in place. You did a rain dance.
Yep,
You got some you got some water, and then what'd you do with fish? Because you already had bass and bluegill in here, and you guys siphoned the lake way down, so the fish you had were concentrated. You know, and I remember we electric fished it, and we shocked up some really nice bass before the lake filled up totally, which was about a year ago or so.
That's right. It filled up last spring, a little longer than a year ago, and so we stocked it, and we probably overstocked a little bit because we knew there were all those pretty good sized bass in there that would whittle them down a little bit.
Yes, and so it went from probably Jeremy Davis, or would it tell if they're dried, take a chainsaw to them, cut them in half, because they didn't. All these telephone poles, they didn't use them their full length. They cut them in half. You know.
Oh, we cut them. Yeah, they were like 12 feet.
So they cut them in 12-foot logs, and then use those so they could have more vertical cover. So when you cut it with a chainsaw, you can see how dried out they are. So there's your little common sense fisheries management 101 right there. Cut it with a chainsaw. All right, so then you got your habitat done. The lake was drawn down to maybe 3 acres, I guess, and then you did the dirt work, did your habitat work, then it filled back up. Then what did you guys do? You stocked some fish in it. I remember that.
Right.
What did you do? Do you remember?
Well, we stocked the bluegill first. A couple months later, we stocked the bass, and so that's been almost a year. And the bass we stocked were 2 to 3 inches.
Okay, so you stocked those probably the end of June of last year.
Right.
Okay.
So less than a year later.
And we looked at those today, and they're 12 to 14 inches long.
Wow.
Relative weights are about right at 100. Some of them have spawned. We picked up, I think it was 5 size classes of bass. So there were bass this big, some that big that have to be this year's fish. which means you had an early spawn, which is, I'm seeing that this year. I'm seeing that fairly regularly in most lakes I've looked at. There was an early hatch, probably just in late February, which is very, very early. Yours might have been the second week of March. And then there's been another spawn in April, and those little bass are about this big, and they're probably 3 to 4 weeks old. I know they're not much older than that, maybe a month at the oldest. And then we picked up 6 size classes of bluegills. Now the lake also has, this is pretty interesting to all you guys that like to manage lakes and ponds. There's in the shallow areas, this water is really hard and the alkalinity's high. So there's a really nice layer of cara or skunk grass, muskgrass, that coats the shallow areas kind of like a carpet, and it's maybe 6 inches tall. And one thing I noticed as we were going around the boat today, I saw some Eurasian water milfoil kick up in the prop wash. We picked up a little bit. I showed them what that is, and the water was crystal clear last year. They got a great bloom right now. Their water looks almost like what a fish hatchery wants. So it looks really, really good. So the stage is set for some really fast growth rates on these fish. And as we made our way around the lake today in a borrowed electrofishing boat, we saw, oh my gosh, hundreds and hundreds of bluegill about that long, up to maybe 3 inches long. So the food chain is primed, and those bluegill have got perfect habitat, 2 feeders going off, water's fertile, the bass are not crowded at all. So they're gonna, this lake's gonna blow up pretty fast. The population density is moderate to mildly low, but that's going to change as these young fish grow up. These 12 to 14 inch bass, I would not be surprised if they're catching some 16 and a half to 18 inch bass this fall. I think the best of the best are going to knock on the door beyond 3 pounds this fall. You know, which at some point they'll surpass the existing bass. Now they stocked F1 tiger bass from American Sport Fish Hatchery at the end of June last year. So there you go. John Dyer, I'm starting to get floating algae mats. Should I skim them out to keep? If you're getting floating algae mats, that algae's dead. It's not going to spread. All it's going to do is shade the sun off. And algae is so volatile. This filamentous algae is what you're talking about. It's so volatile that it can grow up and die every 3 to 5 days. And so you're going to continue to see floating mats for a little while. I don't remember if tilapia are legal in North Carolina or South Carolina. I don't remember what the status is, but check and see if tilapia are legal. If they are, buy some, because they will eat, when they'll start reproducing, their babies will get bound up in those algae mats. They'll eat that and convert that algae to flesh. But I would not worry about skimming them out, because that's going to be pretty irrelevant. It's kind of like peeing on a campfire, you know. It'll make you feel good, but you ain't putting the fire out, because it's going to keep going. So Jeremy Dave's got a question for you, David. Did you build your own siphon to drain it? If so, how did you do that? Explain what you did to siphon the water out.
So our ranch foreman is really mechanical, and trying to recall how he did that.
I think he attaches a centrifugal pump.
So what do you?
And gets it pumping, and then he's able to he pulls the suction on that line.
Okay.
And then he gets it going, and that's all it takes.
Okay, so the way they did that was with a centrifugal trash pump with a hard intake, which they all have that if you do it right, and then gets the pump going, lets it run out of gas, and keeps siphoning, even though the backside, the outlet side, is flexible. So he did that, and that's how they siphoned it out. So Stan just explained that, and I've seen people do it. Justin Ludwig says you have to design the siphon when building or redoing the pond. Otherwise, use a pump or cut the dam. Here's another way to do a siphon. You can take 4-inch PVC, make it just come up the inside slope of the dam, go over the top of the dam, and right there where you angle it at a 45-degree angle, you put in a reducer and reduce it down to about 3/4 of an inch or 1 inch. Put a valve on it. Now you have a foot valve on the inside. And then on the back side of the siphon, so you run across the dam, then you go down below natural ground level as far as you can, down where the creek used to be. and then close that valve. And if you got a valve on the outside and you got a foot valve on the inside, you can take a trash pump and pump that siphon full of water, and then open up the valve on the back side slope. When you open the valve, then it will siphon out. So John Dyer says, what rate should I stock tilapia for 3/4 of an acre? 20 pounds. So what I typically tell people is 20 pounds per surface acre to control algae, 10 pounds per acre if you just want to enhance the food chain. So 20 pounds in a 3/4 acre pond would be a good rate for you to do that. And you ought to be able to do that for $300, and you spend more than that on dadgum algicide. So if they're legal, in some states they are, like in Illinois where Fred Bigeman is, they're not legal. They're going to fire the grill up and get ready to cook some steaks. So you guys, if you got some, foot valve, check valve, same thing, Scott, yes.
20 pounds per acre.
20 pounds per acre.
Okay.
Yep, that's right, if you want to control algae. So if you got an algae issue, 20 pounds. If you don't have an algae issue, you don't need to stock that many. We just got through doing Bay's Lake at 10 pounds per acre because he's got algae growing on stick-ups. And we want to try to convert some of that plant growth into flesh to help feed the fish. So that's kind of the way that works. So what are some of the pitfalls that you guys saw as you were doing this project or as you were trying to figure things out, on this project? Did it all go like you wanted it to? What were some of your takeaways?
One thing that was very surprising that worked out fine was that the leak was so big, and we had to pack clay in such a large area that we had hauled 100 18-wheeler loads or big dump trucks, I guess would be a better description, of clay up there and stockpile that we used every bit of it right there at the start of the core trench. And the contractor, I've used him for years, and we know each other well, and his bid was only for it if it went like he had anticipated. And I told him if we ran into something unanticipated, he could go off bid. So he said he needed to go off bid at that point. And
you had a choice.
Yeah, we had to make a choice. Did we want him to haul more clay up there and core trench the rest of the dam? But the contractor said he felt like that was the leak, and it was such a big leak that once he got it plugged up, that he discouraged me from core trenching the rest of the dam, and we listened to him, and that's what we did, and we only clay packed that one spot. It was like 10% of the dam, and
that worked.
And it worked.
Wow. Okay, so here's one of your take-home points. When you get ready to move dirt and you get a budget more. Because when you start digging down in the ground, you honestly don't know what you're going to find. I think earth movers oftentimes get a bad rap because when they start digging, unless there's a substantial amount of geotech work done, bunch of test holes dug to try to figure this out, there's some unknowns. I mean, you get down 4 feet underground, it may not be anything like you thought. It may be veins of gravel or veins of sand or tight clay. You just don't know. And once you start digging, then you're going to find out. There's Buddy Floyd, premier lake builder from Como, Mississippi. Got his foot up today. He had a little surgery on his foot a few days ago, so he's healing up. It's on his clutch foot, so he'll be able to drive the bulldozer again. So he'll be good. So that's one of the things I think a good piece of advice is when you start setting a budget. What I tell people is add 25% of that budget just for the unknowns, because we don't know. And most earth movers don't know. Buddy Floyd will chime in. He'll tell you that. He builds lakes. He's built some premier, fantastic lakes over in northwestern Mississippi. I've seen them. I've looked at those dams. I've been on those lakes. He does a great job. And he'll be the first to tell you that even when you do all the geotech work, then you cannot be 100% sure of what's going to happen. So budget a little bit more, and and hope that you get to work with a contractor like the Kimbells did to be able to make a smart decision on the fly, because that's one of the absolute truths of lake building is you're going to be making change orders. It's going to happen. You can't do it. All right, there's R.E. Thompson. R.E. Thompson's a pretty amazing guy. I think he's 127 years old. He still mows his own yard, everybody else's yard. He fishes, he manages ponds, he's got a ministry. I think, if I remember, R.E. is like 83 or 84, and he's more active with more energy than most 40-year-olds who are laying on the couch right now. Jeremy Day will trapping crappie crappie work until the bass show up. If you can get him to go on the trap, it is, hey, there's Chico Garcia, my good friend Mike, our videographer. Mike is sitting on some great footage, and he and I are going to need to spend 3 days together to go through that footage and create some cool podcasts. So you guys stay tuned. I'm not sure when we're going to get to it. I'm hoping we get to it in May. If not, we'll definitely get to it in June. And we got some outstanding topics, some good interviews, things like that. So, hey, let's pause a minute for a commercial. Palm Balls Magazine. Play like I'm holding one up. $35 a year. Cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year. David, that's my old catchphrase.
Absolutely. That's been my experience.
You know, when I first took over running the magazine, I had one guy call me. He says, man, I got to tell you, he said, every time I think I want to let my subscription lapse, I open the next magazine and I get at least one nugget that I can use.
Yeah.
And he called it a nugget. And that just kind of burned into my brain. And we try to build the magazine where everybody can get at least a handful of nuggets out of each issue.
Yeah.
And it's at least twice, 3 times a year, I get a call from a long-time subscriber who will say something, hey, Bob, you know, I'm 80, we've sold the property, and I've got like 20 years of back issues of Pond Boss that I've saved as a reference library. Would you like to have them back? You know, and I always say, yeah, let's get them, because somebody somewhere is going to want them. You know, and so it's flattering to know that people subscribe and then hang on to it, you know, as a reference guide. But we do try to throw some nuggets out there for everybody. So $35 a year, Palm Boss Magazine. Go to palmboss.com, click on subscribe, and you'll be able to do that. birddogit.com. Take a look at birddogit.com. That's Jonathan Lusk. Yes, we're kin. Yes, he's my son. Even if he wasn't, I'd still be bragging about this deal. He has created an outstanding model it's kind of like a VRBO and Airbnb for hunting. That's the way it started. And now he's seeing a need and a niche to help landowners. Matter of fact, I think he's been talking to you, hasn't he?
Yeah.
With some things to help with soil fertility and how to do some things for tax advantages and things like that. He is Jonathan's background. He's got a master's. He's got a degree from Texas A&M, and he's got a master's in business and finance from Rice. And he's using that knowledge to help create the model for birddogit.com and help landowners and ranch owners and farmers. So it's a pretty good thing to go look at. Texas Hunter products. I love Texas Hunter feeders. I love their blinds. I love what they do. I love their customer service. I can place an order at 10 o'clock in the morning on any given day, and that feeder is on your porch, on your dock tomorrow or the next day. You know, and if there's any issues, call them. They'll talk you through it. Purina Mills got great products, especially the Aquamax MVP. And of course, we also have to have a little come to Jesus meeting sometimes. I am still working on those guys to make a run of Aquamax largemouth, and I'm hopeful that they're going to do that. But time will tell. You know, we're about to lose the season, but I'm waiting on them. Jeremy Day keeps all his, he says. Let's see what else we got going here. Chico, Lori Moreno, what do you got?
Bob, I'm going to run and start getting that
Cooking
fire
steak.
going and
All right.
get those steaks going while
All right.
you guys wrap up.
All right, we're going to wrap up here in a minute, and we'll hang out.
Yeah,
All right.
enjoyed being on the show.
Yeah, man, thanks. You did a good job.
Okay,
Pretty
thank you.
good guest right there. All right, so let's kind of shift gears a little bit. Lori says, hey, Bob, we have been treating our pond with Sonar Q and copper sulfate in the spring over the years. 3-acre pond in Northern California. Do you recommend to keep going down the route? Okay. Yeah, okay, so I like that question. That's a great question, Lori. It's a very thoughtful question. So Sonar Q, the way that works is that's a long-term material that should have an impact for 2 or 3 years. So I don't see the need to use that every year. And then the copper sulfate is only if you see some algae growing. And if you want to be proactive on it, watch the algae. Here's the ticket. Think about this. Plants need 3 things to grow. They need the right temperature, which you have no control over. They need sunlight penetration, which you might have some control over, depending on the visibility of the water. And the third thing is they need food. So when those 3 things come together for any given plant, when the temperature's right, sunlight's there so they can photosynthesize and create their own energy, and they got food, something's going to grow. So learn the different temperature windows of the different plants. For example, filamentous algae, it fires up about 50, 52, 55 degrees. And when you see it coming, if you want to start knocking it out before it gets out of hand, then you can. Now keep in mind, algae is, I mentioned this earlier, but algae is so volatile that it can grow up, die, and regrow about every 4, 5, or 6 days. So when you see those floating mass on top of the water, that stuff's dead. And if you really study it, you start looking, you see 5 or 6 different colors. You'll see like brown or dark yellow, light yellow, lime green. That's all different ages of that algae that has grown up and has died and is now going through the decomposition process, giving its nutrients back to the next age class or next reproductive phase of filamentous algae. You know, so there you go. He should add fishing, Jeremy Day says. I've already passed that topic and I don't even remember what it was. Buddy Floyd, do your homework. Good is not cheap, and cheap. There you go. Now that's from the book of Buddy right there. That's in the New Testament. Tommy Welch, when should I start taking bluegills out of my pond? Stocked the bluegills 2 years ago. I don't want my bluegills to get stunted. Trying to grow trophy bluegills. Here's the deal on that. We want our bluegill, we want to preserve the biggest bluegills you've got. And after 2 years, if I remember, Tommy, I don't think you've got any bass in there. If you don't, those bluegills are going to be very prolific and they're going to overcrowd. So you do need to harvest some. So what happens there is you want to preserve the biggest bluegills, the best of the best, because they're going to be the ones that will, I'm going to scroll back down here, scrolling up on me. They're the ones that defend the nests. And what in essence happens is when you've got X number of spawning beds with big bluegills on them, they try to fight those younger bluegills off, and those younger bluegills have to get bigger. They have to grow larger in order to run those bigger fish off the nest. So that helps you, since you're trying to grow trophy bluegills, that's part of the drill. You want to, don't take your biggest ones. If you want to take the second size down after 2 years, I don't see anything wrong with that at all. Okay, so let's see. And when you say when, the best time to do that is when you see bluegills beginning to get overcrowded and losing weight. That's the time to start harvesting some bluegills. Especially and if I remember right, Tommy, your pond is not huge, but it's good and manageable. Alex Kepke, Utrosorb is a product from C-Pro that can be used to help eliminate phosphorus from your water body. Should you have that gnarly algae regularly, look into that technology. That's a good idea. That's fairly new technology. So do look at that, because what's in essence is happening, 6 pounds of phosphorus can grow 2 tons of algae, and keep using it over and over and over. You know, now one of the things that I've done in the past with clients is when I would treat their filamentous algae, back in the day when I did that, I haven't done that. I mean, I hired people to do that. It wasn't fun to me, so I didn't do it after about 2015, maybe, so 10 years ago. But what I would do is take a trash pump with a fireman's nozzle on it and put it in the boat and start sucking in lake water and spraying those algae mass to break them up. Oh yeah, okay, Jonathan adds fishing option. I think he's working on that. Actually, he's got a cast and blast that he does down on the coast. Tommy stocked 120 bass. That'll help you, Tommy. 120 bass will help. Actually, most trophy bass ponds that I've ever managed have got overcrowded bass. And we did that on purpose so they could eat the amount of reproduction going on with the bluegills. So, yep, I think that's a good idea. Alex, I use it for pond management should the conditions be right. And the conditions being right means you got to have your brain wrapped around how much phosphorus you got. because that Nutrisorb is not cheap. It's fairly pricey, so it's wise to investigate the volume of phosphorus that you've got, and then decide what to do about it. So there you go. You guys got any more questions? If you don't, I may just go ahead and wrap up and go eat a steak here in a minute. So let me just kind of start going this way. I like this 7:30 to 8:30 time window on Tuesdays. So let's do that for a while. And I think you guys are going to like it okay. I posted it today, and actually Leanne posted it today. And I didn't even think about where it got put. It got put on mine. So Lori says, what's the best way to test the phosphate level? There's several labs that will do that for you. And Lori, I don't know where you are. Oh, did you say you're in California? I'm trying to remember who's in California. Typically, a land-grant university, a state land-grant university does water testing. And I know with as much agriculture as there is in the Central Valley and all parts of California, there are water test labs. If all else fails, my go-to is Texas A&M. I love Texas A&M. It's $40, and they'll give you a pretty good idea as to what you got. Now, here's the catch-22. If you've got phosphorus bound in plants, it's not going to show up in the water test. So the best time to test that water is before plants start to grow in the wintertime. Dave Weber likes the 7:30 time slot. Jeremy Day, creeping primrose is popping up. How do you know when to start being concerned about it? When you think it's a problem. Jeremy Day, when you start seeing that creeping yellow water primrose, that's kind of rhythmic, start to show up, and it's encroaching too far out to suit you, that's when you need to do something about it. Now, if it starts to cover more than 20 or 25% of a pond, that's too much, because that's too much in just one kind of plant. So yeah, you need to do that. Pay attention to that. If it's getting out of hand, then you can certainly spot treat it to reduce the volume of it. You can leave some for fish to hide in the roots of it because it stays on top of the water. So there you go. Well, we've been going about 45 minutes, and I'm at somebody else's house at the ranch, at the Kimbells. Will Sonar Q keep the cattails down? I don't think so. I need to. That should be listed on the label, and if you don't have the label with you, go online because that label's there. So take a look. I don't think that works on cattails, but I don't know. I have extracted myself in the last 10 years from the knowledge I should have about herbicides. So Alex might know the answer to that, so maybe he'll chime in a minute and see. But here's my word of caution. Of all herbicides or any kind of pesticides, read the label. Study the label, make sure you understand it, then follow it. If you'll do that, you'll be successful. One of the issues that I see oftentimes is people misidentify the plants. I remember having a guy, there's Alex right there, Catzilla. I'd forgotten about Catzilla. There you go. Alex knows. He's got this stuff figured out. This guy knows his business. Is Ron bringing Boudin? Is Ron bringing Boudin? I don't think he's even invited. Although, if he wants to come, he's certainly welcome to come. But we're not going to be eating any Boudin from Ron Ardois this time. But we'll have a good menu, I know that. Label is law, period. There you go. That's what you need to do. And I can't tell you how many times, the biggest mistake I see people doing is they don't read the label or they misidentify the plant. Now, one of the ways to positively identify the plant is take a look at Aquaplant website. Pretty good one. Then there's another one at, I think it's University of Florida's got a good one. Aquaplant is Texas A&M's. I like that. I like theirs. It's pretty in depth. It doesn't have all the species, doesn't have all the northern species. It's got species that are predominantly in the south. But there's other species that are in the north that it has. So, take a look at that. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap up and go get ready to help cook a steak. So I'm planning on seeing you guys next Tuesday at 7:30 and help spread the word. And we'll hang out again together, and I really appreciate you guys spending time with me tonight. So until next Tuesday, adios for now.